Today we talk about the Road to Canterbury, 2 to 3 player game, clearly with a strong literary theme. In this game, players play the role of medieval pardonerers that are following the pilgrims going to Canterbury, and these pardonerers in reality are greedy con men that are trying to get money out of the pilgrims. In order to do so, they lead the pilgrims into temptations so that the pilgrims will commit sins, and then the pardoners sell them fake pardons. In order to be more persuasive, these pardoners are even going to use fake relics that they have built beforehand. In any case, enough with this introduction. Let's jump right in and talk about the mechanics of the game. The game is played on two boards, a main board where the main action takes place and a secondary board, which is this one, where you organize your cards. Very convenient board. Here you place the deck of Pilgrim cards. These are very nice, very sturdy cards. 3 of them are always going to be available on the main board, and they represent the pilgrims that you are tempting into sin, you're attempting to commit sin, and each pilgrim is particularly open to one particular type of sin. And these cards never go into the player's hands. They always stay either here or on the board. Then you have sin cards. Each card is associated with a specific sin, like envy or wrath. And there are going to be 3 such cards available face up at all times, and a deck of cards to draw from. That means that when you draw a card, a sin card, you can always choose to pick up one of those that are face up, and then you refill that slot from the deck. Or if you do not like what you're seeing, you draw a card from the deck. Then you have pardon cards. Also, each card is associated with a sin, pride, greed, etc. And then same thing here, you can draw one of those that are face up, and then you refill that slot, or you draw from the deck. You also have a deck of relics. Relic cards do not have any face up cards available, so you're always drawing randomly here, and each relic has a specific power that is granted when you're playing the card, and each relic has a text that explains what the card does. Some are very powerful and very flexible, some cards are much more situational, so there's definitely more luck involved when you decide to draw a relic. Some relics also have this symbol here that allows you to move the parson pawn on the main board. I will explain later what that is. You start the game with a hand of 5 sins. During your turn, you always play a card. If you do not play a card, you have to pay a penalty in gold. And after you play the card and resolve the card, you draw back until you have a hand of 5 cards. There may be card effects that reduce your hand further, so at the end of your turn, you still draw back until you have 5. And the very cool thing is that you can always choose to draw any combination of sins, pardons, and relics. And this is very important because it adds an interesting dimension to the hand management aspect of the game. The game comes with a good amount of coins, which you use to track your wealth, and coins is also what you use to win the game. Each gold is a victory point. You also have these bags where you place your coins, and these money bags are very thematic, but also very important because they prevent the players from obsessively counting how many points they have and how many points each of the opponents have, so that is good because it prevents analysis paralysis. Each player also has a pool of cubes of the owning player, and then you have the main board, which is a real beauty. It is just beautiful. On the main board, you will have the locations where you place the pilgrims. Then you have here the circle of sin with the 7 sins. Here is where you place the parson pawn in one of the spaces randomly at the beginning of the game. In the middle of the board, you have the area where you place these beautiful tokens, the last rites tokens. And here you have the map that represents the itinerary to Canterbury, from the starting point to Canterbury, and there are several stations along the way. During your turn, you play a card on the board and you fill your hand back to 5. That is pretty much what happens during your turn. If you're playing a sin card, you will place the sin card by one of the of the pilgrims. You're tempting that pilgrim with that sin. At this time, the sin printed on the pilgrim card does not matter. You can play gluttony on any of these pilgrims. That symbol there, I mean that sin there, only matters when a death card is drawn from the sin deck at the end of your turn. When you draw a death card, this is a special type of card, the card does not go in your hand, you place it immediately by the pilgrim of the corresponding color. For example, this is a light blue death, then it goes by that pilgrim, and we also have a yellow death and green death. That card, that death card there represents the sin on the card of the pilgrim. If placed there, that card represents gluttony. If this character receives a death card, then the death card in that position by that character means envy. Anyways, when you play a sin, then you mark that sin on the circular wheel with one of your cubes. You played gluttony, then you place a cube there. Later you play idleness, then you play a cube there. So during the game, sins will be added to the characters. When enough sins are there to make a pardon interesting, you can play a pardon card. You play it on one of the characters, and that card pardons all of the corresponding sins belonging to that character. In this case, for example, I play this card on the monk, and the monk has 2 pride cards. I pardon those cards and I flip them face down to indicate that they cannot be pardoned again. Also, if the parson pawn is on the sin that I am pardoning, that counts as an extra card. In this case, my action counts as pardoning 3 cards. Then you look at your beautiful player aid here that tells you how much gold you get for a pardon. By pardoning 3 cards, or for example 2 cards and in the pawn, then I get 9 money, which is, well, pretty good. And I add that money to my money bag. When you pardon a character, you also add a cube to the character card, not to the circle of sin. And then later, if other sins are pardoned, again, the player that pardoned that sin or sins gets to add cubes to the pilgrim card. When the 7th card is played on a pilgrim, and that may be a card played by a player or a death card that comes out of the deck unpredictably, when that happens, the pilgrim is dead. The player that added the last card receives a last right token just for being there when the pilgrim was dying, and if you perform the last rites, you get this token that you can spend to take an extra turn, or you can keep until the end of the game, and this is worth 3 victory points. In any case, when a character dies, you remove all of the sin cards there. You take one of the cubes, the cube of the player that has majority on the card, and you place it on the map representing the journey. And you place it on the leftmost station. So the first cube would go there. The second pilgrim dies. The player with the majority would play a cube there. And then later maybe it's like this, and maybe then we are like that. And when a cube is moved to one of these stations, the player owning that cube immediately receives the bonus printed there. The game will be over when a cube is placed on the last station, which is Canterbury itself. Then the pilgrim card that may still have some cubes on is played face down by the corresponding pilgrim, that was the pilgrim, with the cubes left on that card. And then you will replace the pilgrim, and in case this pilgrim dies, this pilgrim also goes there, and all the cubes that will still be there will go on that card too. So basically each company, the blue company, yellow company, and green company, will accumulate cubes that have been spent to tempt characters in that company. So you continue the game adding sins and pardoning sins and playing relics until the 5th character dies, and that ends the game because the last cube is going to be placed on the road to Canterbury. At that point you score points. Well, as you have seen, points have been scored throughout the game. You score points for pardoning sins, but actually there are also other ways. If you are the first player that has a sin in all areas of the circle of sin, in all of those 7 areas, if you manage to place a cube in all of them, then you get 20 points, which is huge, but also risky. You may spend half of your game one sin short from completing the thing, and maybe somebody else completes it first. Well, if you complete it second, you still get 10 points, and if you are the 3rd player to complete it, 5 points. As we saw, the towns on the road grant you an immediate benefit, but also at the end of the game there will be a player that will get 20 points if that player has the majority of the roads on the stations on the road. In this case, the purple player has majority of roads there, has most towns on the road, and gains 20 points, which is very good. If there is a tie, that is broken by looking at the number of cubes on the circle of sins. Player with the highest number of cubes there wins ties. So having cubes there is a risky investment during the game, because you may or may not be able to beat the player that is the first to complete the circle, but at least it is good because you can break ties at the end of the game. The second player with most towns on the road gets 10 points and then 5 points, and then you also look at the majority in each company. This is what these cards are for, the cards by each company, and again, majority gets the highest amount of points, and then you have 2nd and 3rd place, and again, the cubes on this wheel here break ties. After you have totaled all of the victory points the players have earned, you determine the winner, who is of course the player with the highest amount of points. This, in essence, is a very simple game. What you do each turn is you play a card. Usually you place a cube on a character or on the circle of sin, and that is it. Then you resolve the effects of what you created. And yet, around such simple idea, there are a lot of meaningful decisions that you have to make. This is really a game packed with decisions. You have hand management. You have to decide what type of cards you're going to draw, what combination you're going to have in your hand, and that will change throughout the game probably. Then you have area control. You have to decide where you're going to invest in order to achieve points. Are you going for ambitious plans like trying to get the entire circle of sins, or are you going to try to take control of 1 or 2 areas? Are you looking at the road and you want to take control there? Ideally you will want to be powerful in all of these areas, but it's gonna be hard, so maybe probably you will have to decide. I like, in fact, the way in which different ways of scoring are connected to each other, and those force you to make all sorts of decisions. If you are trying to complete the circle of sins at the center of the board, then you're playing a lot of sin cards, and that means that you're probably contributing to prepare good sets of sins that then other players will pardon. On the other hand, if you are pardoning, you're getting a lot of money, but you're not getting cubes on the circle of sins. So you just cannot do everything, and you have to figure out not just what strategy is most beneficial to you, but also what strategy will be most profitable based on what the other players are doing, because it is all about majority. So you really have to follow what the other players are doing and adjust accordingly. This also means that there is a considerable screwage factor. There are really many things that you can do to annoy the other players to get in the way of what they're doing. A player is 1 sin short from completing the circle of sins, and then you see face up the card that the player needs and you grab it just for the sake of it. That's a pretty low blow, but it is perfectly valid. It is a perfectly valid strategy, and there are just other ways in which this may happen. What else I liked? Well, I really like many things in here. I like the death cards. I think they're really crucial. You really need those to create that unpredictable aspect. Otherwise, things can become a little too stiff. On the other hand, definitely this is not enough luck to make the design luck-based. Strategy is still very important. I would say strategy and even tactics. You still have to adjust from time to time what other players are doing, and again you had to adjust depending on some new twists of fate that the game may generate. So, in conclusion, I found this design to be very enjoyable. I really enjoyed playing it. I like the way in which you score here. I like the interaction among the players. I like the different levels of strategy that you can create, and definitely what I like the most is that this is a game that is packed with meaningful decisions at every step of the road. So, in conclusion, The Road to Canterbury to me is a solid design and definitely one that I enjoyed.